the severing of two fibre optic cables under the Baltic Sea as an act of sabotage.
Of damage to two undersea telecommunications cables in the Baltic Sea.
Two fibre optic cables under the Baltic Sea.
From Russia's shadow fleet to China's maritime claims, every action threatens the freedom of the seas. The most frequent arena for these threats is the Baltics. China is uncomfortable with submarine cables in the Baltics. Invisible but vital, undersea cables support internet services and communications, and many other aspects of daily life that are often taken for granted. According to North Atlantic Treaty Organization, around 99% of the world's data passes over undersea cables, but they are vulnerable to attack in a situation known as hybrid warfare. The Baltic Sea is largely surrounded by North Atlantic Treaty Organization member states and is sometimes referred to as a North Atlantic Treaty Organization lake. Russia has a significant footprint from the Kaliningrad exclave. China is looking to Russia to become a major player in the Baltics. Aggressive sabotage by Russia and China in the Baltics is causing security problems in the Baltic Sea. Such actions are always under North Atlantic Treaty Organization scrutiny. In fact, the other day, Sweden, the latest member of the alliance, made an unthinkable move. Sweden seized a Chinese ship and said enough is enough to the Beijing government. So how did this critical process take place? How could Sweden's move affect China and Russia? For answers to our questions and more, our video begins. Swedish authorities have seized a Chinese vessel suspected of sabotaging an underwater cable in the Baltic Sea. This is the most recent in a string of suspected sabotage events aiming at important undersea cables in the Baltic Sea under North Atlantic Treaty Organization control. Swedish officials are allegedly going to probe the possible sabotage. Xi Jinping has been hit with this inquiry process and had to confront Baltic reality. China would endanger the freedom of water bodies and be unable to employ its ships at sea at will. As the alliance started a new project, the Baltic Sentinel, to safeguard vital North Atlantic Treaty Organization infrastructure, including undersea cables, in face of a rising threat in the area, the detention of the Chinese ship sparked a worldwide outrage. To boost monitoring in the area, North Atlantic Treaty Organization has sent marine drones, maritime patrol airplanes, and frigates. Right now, this location is watched around the clock. Consequently, should you engage in sabotage, you run a great risk of being caught and your ship will be seized. And the Chinese ship was unable to avoid the great eyeballs. Online maritime database Equasis claims local reports found the vessel to be the Malta-flagged bulk ship Beijing, owned by Haikuo Shipping 2015B from Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Industrial and Commercial Bank, a state-owned bank in the People's Republic of China, owns the shipping company itself. The company, under the name Haikuo Shipping, is among 270 industrial and commercial bank consolidated entities, according to the paper. Important comments came from Latvia with the disclosure of the firm and Sweden's choice to grab the Chinese-owned ship. Latvian Prime Minister Evika Silina said that a criminal inquiry was started following damage to a data cable from Latvia to Sweden in Sweden's exclusive economic zone. Silina claimed they are looking at the issue with North Atlantic Treaty Organization and their Swedish friends. Both Latvian and Swedish boats are combing the region looking for further vessels. These patrols are essential for security in the Baltics since Latvia's state-owned Latvian State Radio and Television Centre, which runs the damaged cable, has found cuts in the segment of cable linking the port city of Ventspils to the northern Swedish island of Gotland. The Latvian State Radio and Television Centre thinks that the cable is less than 160 feet below the surface and damaged roughly 130 kilometres from Ventspils. Hence, it seems a much more practical choice for Swedish and Latvian patrol vessels to concentrate on this designated area. The last link in the Baltican chain of sabotage is the seizure of the Chinese ship. Recall that the ship Jazz experienced engine issues sailing close to the Baltic Sea, particularly off the coast of Finland, on December 29, 2024. Travelling from Russia to the North Sea, the ship, a tanker thought to be part of the Shadow Fleet, recorded an engine failure at 17:45, therefore slowing its speed to barely 1.6 knots. During the ship's journey, the malfunction occurred first among 3 instances. Every time Jazz floated across important underwater construction. Jazz floated over the Sea Lion 1 communication cable, a lifeline underwater cable between Germany and Finland, during the next days. The anchor of the Chinese merchant ship Yipeng 3 earlier destroyed this unique cable. Danish Navy ships trailed the ship over the Denmark Strait, as you might remember, from the Baltic Sea to the Atlantic. The Yipeng 3 stopped just outside Danish territorial boundaries after exiting the Great Belt, therefore giving the Danish authorities significantly less authority to hold the ship and its crew than if it had stopped inside Danish territorial boundaries. You lose the picture if you concentrate on sabotage. Showing the world the Sino-Russian harmony is Russia's actual objective. Not even did they try to conceal the sabotage. Conversely, the apparent engine problems of the Jazz seem to correspond nearly precisely with its proximity to these undersea cables. In all 3 occasions, the ship slowed down and aimlessly floated for hours or days close to sites of vital underwater infrastructure, including additional cables and pipelines. This behaviour pattern, along with growing worries about hybrid warfare, have caused major doubts among professionals on the likelihood of intentional sabotage efforts by the Russian Shadow Fleet. Comprising a collection of aged warships, many of which are connected to Russian operations in the Baltic and North Sea, the Shadow Fleet is often used to evade Western sanctions placed on Russia for its activities in Ukraine. These ships run without appropriate insurance or regulatory control. These ships have been a source of conflict in the European security discussion since many analysts now believe that their operations are not only accidental but also part of a bigger campaign to test and compromise Western infrastructure, especially underwater cables. Jazz ran up yet another engine issue close to the Swedish island of Gotland on January 9, 2025. She drifted once more close to the Sea Lion 1 cable running between Germany and Sweden along the seabed. A third incident happened on January 11, when the ship broke down once more between the Swedish island of Bornholm and the Danish island of Lolland. In this case, the ship was drifting over the previously damaged Sea Lion 1 cable and close to the Baltic Pipe gas pipeline, therefore raising more questions of deliberate disturbance. Investigative groups like Danwatch and Dagbladet Information tracked and documented the ship's course, engine issues, and slow speeds. They observed that Jazz was positioned exactly over the submarine cables during every failure, which begged questions about whether this was merely a set of coincidences. In the view of experts, the ship was even more suspicious since it was going slowly, only quickly enough to avoid anchoring, and then instantly drifted for no apparent reason. Defining the ship's behaviour as very unusual, Peter Viggo Jacobsen, a defence analyst at the Danish Defence Academy, pointed out the odd pattern of engine failures and the fact that they always happen close to significant underwater infrastructure. The frequent proximity to important cables implied that there was something else at work than a mechanical breakdown. Jens Wenzel Christoffersen, a Navy captain and military analyst, likewise strongly doubted the theory that the engine failures of the ship were just chance occurrence. Christoffersen proposed that rather than actual sabotage, these events might have been attempts to assess North Atlantic Treaty Organization's readiness for possible disruption. The owner of the ship, T-Rex Maritime Trading, has refuted claims of an intentional involvement in espionage or sabotage despite mounting mistrust. Declaring that the engine failure was only a standard engine failure, the corporation refuted claims that the Jazz belonged to a shadow fleet. They likewise denied any relationship to subsea cables. However, given Jazz's ongoing path and the rising frequency of dubious activity in the area, this refutation did not much help to relieve worries. Investigations on the infrastructure of the area persisted meanwhile. Finnish authorities, for instance, were looking at damage to many data cables in the Baltic Sea and damage to the Estlink 2 power line between Finland and Estonia. Though not extensively, the Estlink 2 cable ruptured on December 5, 2024, leading to occasional interruptions. This episode followed damage to the Nord Stream gas pipelines, hitherto referred to be sabotage. The drift trace discovered by Finnish researchers on the seabed seems to be the anchor mark of a Russian shadow fleet ship, tens of kilometres, maybe 100 kilometres. The drift mark was covered by Finnish officials who identified it as the creation of the Eagle S, a ship registered in the Cook Islands but thought to be part of the Russian Navy, under accusations of felony interference with telecommunications and vandalism. Finland police seized the yacht and started an inquiry. North Atlantic Treaty Organization officials have been worried about cable damage, especially in the Baltic Sea, as they view the area as a possible hybrid warfare flashpoint. Following rising attempts at sabotage, North Atlantic Treaty Organization Secretary-General Mark Rutte has urged more security to safeguard infrastructure. Now, a major component of North Atlantic Treaty Organization's policy in the area, Finland, which joined the alliance in 2023. The actions of the Shadow Fleet were under close examination, while North Atlantic Treaty Organization patrols in the Baltic Sea were growing. JAS and related vessels in the area served as a sobering reminder of the escalating threat to Europe's undersea cables. From digital communications to energy transfer, these cables are absolutely vital. Any disturbance or sabotage might have broad consequences on national security as well as the economy. Experts, like senior researcher Flemming Splidsball of the Danish Institute for International Studies, said it was time for European nations to react more firmly to the Shadow Fleet. The crucial point is to make use of the instruments at hand in the struggle against the Shadow Fleet. Look at what is available and stretch to the furthest extreme. Professionals concurred that claiming there is no proof of Russian influence is insufficient now. It was time for nations to intervene to safeguard these important networks. The JAS is anchored off the shore of Skagen, but the circumstances of its probable participation in the sabotage remain unresolved. Whether the ship participated in any activities meant to cause disturbance to the vital infrastructure of the area is yet unknown. But the rising trend of engine failure close to these subsea cables and mounting proof of Russian involvement in like events point to more hazards. Europe has to act to safeguard its maritime infrastructure as worries about the Shadow Fleet develop. JAS might be only the top of the iceberg in the continuous fight to defend the continent's digital and energy networks from hybrid warfare methods. The fragility of Europe's underwater infrastructure is shown by the recent string of engine breakdowns on the JAS, along with sabotage and hybrid warfare in the Baltic and North Sea. Russia keeps claiming its dominance in the area, and the threat presented by the Shadow Fleet and other comparable vessels is probably going to get more prominent. Europe has to be ready to meet these problems head-on as planned attacks on pipelines and crucial connections are real. Whether JAS actually participated in any sabotage effort or not, the circumstances surrounding it emphasise the need of more awareness and more security policies to safeguard Europe's important underwater systems. Damage to submarine infrastructure. The state shall adopt the required laws and regulations to provide that it shall be a punishing offence for a ship flying its flag, or a person subject to its jurisdiction, to intentionally or by culpable negligence break or damage a submarine cable under the high seas in such a manner as to interrupt or impede telegraph or telephone communications, similarly to break or damage a submarine pipeline or high-voltage power cable. This clause will also cover behaviour meant to produce such damage or rupture. Countries bordering the oceans where these and like events have happened have struggled to penalise individuals engaged. Nevertheless, New Polar Bear departed the scene right away, and People's Republic of China and Hong Kong Special Administrative Region did not assist the inquiry despite their United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea commitments in the 2023 sabotage of underwater cables and pipelines in the Baltic Sea. Regarding Nord Stream, the Swedish and Danish investigators ended the cases and failed to file criminal charges. Given the limited law enforcement authority of coastal governments in their exclusive economic zones, this is hardly shocking. It also highlights the limits of criminal justice for alleged marine grey zone activity. Regarding this matter, the United Nations Security Council likewise lacked a consensus. Sweden, Denmark, or both could file a lawsuit against the nation allegedly responsible for the sabotage at the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. often handling United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea issues. Given China's history of defying court orders, such a decision is unlikely to have any major influence. Although state participation is difficult to show, sea-based infrastructure is quite susceptible to damage connected with states. Although Taiwan has not proven that the Chinese government helped to cut the two cables linking the Matsu Islands to Taiwan, therefore isolating the islands from the rest of the world. Expanding sea-based infrastructure in the post-Cold War world, especially the internet cables supporting contemporary economies, was predicated on the expectation that states and businesses would follow maritime norms. This is no longer the case, and the present growth of offshore wind farms generates another sizable class of sea-based equipment subject to damage. Although NATO started the critical submarine infrastructure network in May 2024, it is not apparent what else the network can accomplish except track hazards to this infrastructure. The same is true of governments, who can monitor sea-based infrastructure in their territorial seas and exclusive economic zones, but will be under great difficulty to provide a suitable reaction should they find continuous sabotage. In territorial waters, they can arrest offenders, but in an EEZ, this is challenging and nearly impossible on the high seas. Escalatory and so rather improbable would be a military or other forceful response to sabotage. Sea-based infrastructure owners and operators now keep closer eye on their assets. Though they can notify authorities to suspect activity, they lack legal power to prosecute saboteurs. While adherence to international maritime norms has never been flawless overall, infractions are fast rising. Past transgressions, particularly piracy, were under control since the offenders confronted a community of states joined to uphold maritime order. But today, the offenders include two of the most powerful countries in the world, those of China and Russia. For two reasons: to get economic advantage and to express their hostility to the global maritime order, particularly as it has been developed over decades after World War II, they seem to be transgressing the rules of the sea. Russia and China seem resolved to challenge this system since they view it as Western-led construct. This reality seriously compromises the freedom of the oceans. If the Western-centric shipping business cannot rely on innocent passage and ships that formally sail risk colliding with phantom ships and being attacked for geopolitical reasons, then shipping lines and insurers will no longer be able or willing to operate in a given region of the world. The same is true for owners and operators of sea-based infrastructure. China's enforcement of its unilaterally declared maritime borders makes these waters unsafe for the countries to which they formally belong. The freedom of the seas is at risk of fatal disruption, but we should appreciate NATO's efforts to minimize this risk. Thank you for tuning in.